Let's go to T.S. Dixon, the conservative analyst and author. Sir, thank you again for joining us on Right Side. Talk to us about, I don't know, whatever you want at this point. I mean, 30,000-foot view. We know there's a lot going on with Israel and Iran. There's a lot going on in our country. How do you see things playing out? What's some insight that you'd like to share?
Well, I think, this is a very interesting turn of events. It's obviously divided the movement on the right, that are Trump's main support base. And, there's a good reason for that. I think half of the coalition just inherently trust Trump. They trust Israel, Netanyahu, and any of our allies. They just inherently trust our allies. And they see it as the good guys versus the bad guys. And when they're told by the media, by the intelligence agencies and Netanyahu that Iran definitely is close to having a nuclear weapon, and that's a huge threat, we need to do something about it, they're fully on board. The other side, the other camp, just has a very low level. One in the war machine, which came and gave us a similar message about Iraq and Afghanistan, especially Iraq. They've got weapons of mass destruction. He's developing a nuclear program. We have to invade and defeat and depose Saddam Hussein. And it was disastrous for our country, disastrous for our military, disastrous for Europe, who had to take all these migrants, which has devastated Europe. And we did the same thing in Libya, in Syria, Afghanistan. And it's just been 20 years of chaos in the Middle East and these regime change wars. And so there's very low trust in that. There's very low trust in the CIA and the intelligence agencies that targeted Donald Trump, his elections, his candidacies, his presidencies, and they're now feeding us this information. And then there's a lot of low trust in Netanyahu, who has been doing some questionable things. He's had a major investigation into corruption charges. He's facing jail time, as many prime ministers have in Israel in the past. And then there's the questions about the military stand down on October 7th and what his true motivations are for these major military actions at this time. And so the rest of the coalition is just very much dubious about these three sources of information. And so there's a low trust level. I would say that there's another angle on this that I don't hear a lot of people talking about. Trump is the great reformer. He's the anti-establishment hero of the people. He's the populist leader. And so because he's attacking the foundations and the pillars of the establishment and bringing them down in many ways, you see things like CNN crumbling and these other institutions crumbling after he's through with them. They have to retaliate, but they can't retaliate at him directly. They have to be covert about their actions. And so we saw in the first presidency this questionable release of a virus at a Wuhan, U.S.-China viral lab in China, in Wuhan, China, and the results of that, which really devastated the economy with the shutdowns and devastated his presidency. This time around, what we're hearing from this same establishment group, like Alex Karp, who, this past week a lot of people weren't aware, but they were meeting in Europe at the annual Bilderberger meeting, which is basically, it's the board meeting for the current establishment. And so Alex Karp was quoted to the New York Times saying that in not too long in the future, the U.S. is going to be in a three-front war with Russia, Iran, and China. And so, in my opinion, if they're saying that from this coalition and this is the strategy, then it's very possible that that we're being duped into this. We're being lured into this conflict, and I think we need to be very aware of that possibility, that risk.
So when we're looking at both sides of the coin here, again, generally speaking, one side says we know that the Ayatollahs there, that this is they love Sharia law, they hate America, they hate Israel, they have these nuclear weapons, or they're trying to enrich that at Fordo in the mountain, so the bunker busting bombs with the United States military dropping them from the B-2s because Israel doesn't have that. Or on the other side of it, it's, hey, this is a war, this is the free world we're talking about here. We don't want to get involved in another long war and all these different things that I'm hearing. So I'm just reporting what I'm hearing from both sides.
Sure.
So where do you stand, TS? Let's just be straight up about it. You have freedom of speech, go for it.
It's funny because I sympathize with Trump's position. He obviously has more information than we have, and understandably, we doubt that some of the intelligence he's getting is correct or trustworthy because of the past and because of they've targeted him in the past. They have ulterior motives on some level. So it's tough. It's a tough call. And, this is what leadership comes down to is making tough calls. And Trump's never afraid to make a tough decision if he believes it's the right decision. And so we'll see. He's not a warmonger or a war hawk, but he's also not a pacifist, and he's not afraid to protect America and keep us safe. We saw this with the ISIS strikes, the Moab strike, Soleimani, and whatnot. He is not afraid to use the military for tactical precision missions. However, will Trump get us into a long, drawn-out ground war? I doubt it. I hope not. The concern is that right now it's a fight between Israel and Iran, and we're supporting our ally. I think that that's pretty safe. Israel desperately wants us to come in and participate in the violence and attack directly. If we directly attack Iran, which is a country of 92 million people with a vast military capability, vast amount of long-range missiles and different weaponry. If we attack them directly, they're going to attack our ships and our bases, and then we are in direct warfare. And we've had a bad history of this for the last 20 years, and it was well known that they were on a list of 7 countries that Israel tactically wanted to undermine, destabilize, and do regime change. And they've been successful in getting us to participate in the regime changes and the destabilization of these other 6 countries. And now this is the final one to complete that mission. This really hasn't been good for the country. So I think you have to weigh both sides. I trust Trump. If there really are nukes there and it truly is a threat, he'll get it done.
I hear you. Producer, can you please repeat? Can you hold TS for a second?
Sure.
Okay. All right, so it's 12:58. We got a couple minutes yet until Carolyn Levitt may be taking the podium there. Sometimes it's a little bit late, so if it is, TS will keep you on the broadcast. Can you talk to us about outside of the specific situation of the Iran-Israel war and all of that, like the 30,000-foot view of what's going on right now in the country? I mean, we see domestically ICE agents doing mass deportations. We see that the same old Antifa groups are trying to rile up the woke mind people. What do you think the solution is to where the ideologies are coming from? And what's the best case scenario? What should we really do as the American people?
I really feel that the focus of the conservative movement and the Trump presidency should be on balancing the budget and reforming the federal government. I mean, these really are his 2 major mandates. And by reforming, that includes the deportations, that includes the wall, that includes all of those agenda items. But really, we need to balance the budget, we need to cut spending, and we need to reform the government. And at this point in his reform, we really need to be on step 4 of the federal reforms, which is, the administration of justice, the investigations into criminality, into government corruption of the past, and then adjudication of that, punishment of that. And so if that step doesn't happen, then there's really no consequence for corruption in the first place. And so as soon as, this group is out of power or can be undermined and the left gets back into power, the corruption will resume, but it'll resume even worse than before because they'll never want to lose power again or risk that. And so really we have this precious amount of time before the midterms and the next election to complete the reforms. And he's been doing a great job, a AAA++ job. However, we need to complete that work. And so that really comes down to the Attorney General, the Director of National Intelligence, the Director of the FBI, and the special investigators that need to do great work and go and hunt down the corruption. I mean, they're doing good work when it comes to regular crime or the crime of the average citizenry crime. But what this movement is out to discover and uncover is the crime of government officials, the corruption of government officials. and then accountability for that, legal accountability for that. That's so crucial. If you look in El Salvador and other countries where this was done correctly, these reforms will be lasting. And the anti-corruption narrative is such a powerful narrative and so in the interest of the whole country. But you still have the boiling over of the left versus the right. The left hasn't gone anywhere. Woke hasn't gone anywhere. It's still there fomenting. This is a belief system, a political religion on the left now, and they're forced to be reckoned with. We saw the No Kings protests. We saw the riots in LA recently. And if we do our job right, all these protests and riots will do is continue to turn the stomachs of the average American citizens in the center and say, these people can never be in power again. They'll not just burn down California, but they'll burn down the whole country.
Exactly. So we see the reformation of the country happening, but to your point, the justice being served for those that broke the law, specifically over the past, 4 years and beyond. Carlos Sands actually brought up this point as well. So to your point, I think MAGA hears you, I hear you, and we want to have all the corruption to be gone out of this country. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we're really looking to have. But let's go one more step further as we're about to go to Carolyn Levitt here in a minute. What's the root that you believe is, I know it's good and evil, but how does that come out into the ideologies up to the surface?
In our era, and in every era, but it's most pronounced now, ideology is everything. And so you have to get down to the root beliefs of different groups, different factions, of support groups like voter bases, and also of ideologues and leaders of movements. And so now more than ever, we must understand, in our own country, what liberals, the woke globalists like, Peter Thiel and Alex Karp and those at Bilderberg, what they believe, and then what we believe as Americans, for Americanism, constitutionalism, conservatives, capitalists, what we believe, what is our ideology, because that's the source of everything. And really, a lot of the good and evil that we see in countries and groups and in individuals stems out of their ideology. So if you have evil beliefs, a lot of times in your behavior, your actions, your goals will be evil. But if you have good beliefs and good ideology, then your outcomes, your behavior will be good. It's much of our behavior is driven by our belief system and even the rules that we believe. Now we're being pulled and lured into these conflicts overseas, and so then it becomes imperative we understand what the Israelis believe, what Netanyahu's coalition, this government coalition believe, and then what the Ayatollahs believe, because ideology is also at the root of that conflict.
It's a lot to take in. T.S. Dixon, sir, thank you for joining us. Just before you go, any words of advice moving forward for the people that are watching right now all across this country, in some cases around the world. And I value your insight, because every time you've been on this broadcast, you spit truth, and we are a common sense network here, and you have the freedom of speech to do that. So just before I let you go, just any final words to the people that are watching?
Yeah, I would say, Trump will make the determination if a surgical strike is necessary in this conflict, or if we just need to support our ally as they engage in a conflict they deem is necessary to the security of their state. However, I think a ground war, a long, drawn-out war with Iran, is beyond a huge mistake. It needs to be avoided at all costs, and it will weaken us. And then it will be much more tempting for China to then pursue their military objectives in Taiwan, which will then draw us into yet a third conflict around the world and further weaken and spread out our forces and our money and our focus, instead of focusing here on the reforms and sustaining and growing America, which makes for a better world. So that's what I would say. That's my take.
And I hear you. I do have more of a sincere question about when we look at President Trump's surgical strikes on the Houthis or on ISIS, and these are surgical strikes. If you look at the video, this vehicle is driving along, and if this person's in the left side of the car, that is exactly getting hit, nothing else. Now, when you look at Iran and Fordo and the mountain area and these bunker busting bombs, is this the same thing? Is it just a surgical strike and then let it go and be like, okay, we did our job, see you later? Or is this, if that happens, will that mean okay, now the government is toppled. Do we go there? To be honest, I don't know the answers. So can you help clarify a little bit?
Yeah, it hasn't worked thus far in any country where we've tried to depose the leader, the dictator, and then install our own government or try to institute elections. It has not worked in any country where that's been attempted. Most recently, the Turkey and Israeli governments supported the installation of a new leader in Syria after Bashar al-Assad fled to Russia. But that new leader was the head of al-Qaeda and also one of the key leadership members of ISIS. So we'll see how that played out. He's already instituted the genocide of minority groups,
right,
of Christians and Alawite Muslims.
No, and I hear you. But to interject a little bit, we know that we haven't heard from President Trump saying he's looking for a regime change in Iran. I'm just talking about specifically, is this like a surgical strike to the Houthis, the surgical strike to take out somebody that's the lead of ISIS, and then also, hey, Fordo, the mountain area where the Iran military site is, a surgical strike in the sense of bunker busting bombs, and then you pull back and then that's it, and there's no other ties from there. Is that what we're looking at here?
If he can successfully do that without them striking our bases or sinking any of our ships in that region, which would most likely then draw us into all-out war with them, that is the challenge that he faces. That's the risk. If he does, this is not a small country or a country that's not well armed. They have missiles, underground missile cities. So their capabilities are vast. I don't know that we fully understand their capabilities. If he makes that determination and can't get the leader back to the negotiating table to do some sort of a deal, and he determines that that's necessary, I would say that needs to be the limit of that. He wouldn't say that, right? You don't say this is as far as we're going to go. This is just bad military command, but I would say he knows more than anyone. He was one of the biggest critics of Iraq and Afghanistan in the Bush administration, that you don't suck us into these long drawn out wars, especially, really the group that Trump is fighting, that is desperately trying to cling on to life and stop him, is the Western establishment. That's the group that's after him. And if he needs to focus on that enemy and defeating them and reforming the United States, which will have a ripple effect throughout the West. We're already seeing these effects on Britain, Germany, and other Western countries. And so that's the real enemy is the Western establishment. And they would love nothing more than to continue to deviate him away to these other overseas boogeymen and then draw us into years-long conflicts with them, which will ensure the continuation of their dominance over Western civilization. Absolutely.
So to your point,
I think that's what we have to keep in mind.
To your point, you're saying then basically arrests need to be made for those that broke the law, that are within the deep state or globalist against our country, and really,
if they've committed crimes, if there's been crimes, yes.
Of course.
Absolutely.
And for our country to be made healthy again as well, without the corruption that's deep. Man, T.S. Dixon, thanks so much for your insight and analysis. T.S. Dixon, a conservative analyst and author, thank you again for joining us on Right Side Broadcasting Network.
Thanks, Matt.